July 14th, 2023. It is a Friday morning in sugar country. Sibusiso Mpinga and Nhlanhla Gabela forced their way through the gate of the Lunat family home in Dalton, armed with knives and an intent to kill. They found Shanis Lunat, 30, in the passage where family photos lined the walls, the corridor where he'd walked from childhood to manhood. Multiple stab wounds ended his life in seconds. The sounds carried through the house to his father, Ismail, 63, who grabbed a torch and tried to save his dying son. They beat him to death with his own desperate weapon, then stole the family savings from his bedroom cupboard. Two men dead in their fortress home, killed behind high walls, burglar bars, and heavy gates they'd built to keep danger out. This is Brick and Blood, South African Town Tales. Dalton lies in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands, carved out of cane fields and railway lines. This is sugar country, rolling green rows stretching over hills, punctuated by the white plumes of factory smoke. Warehouses, silos, and service roads dominate the horizon. But Dalton is also defined by its in-between spaces, family homes standing behind high walls, barred windows catching morning light, gates that promise security but can't always deliver it. On July 14th, 2023, Friday morning, Ismail Lunat, 62, begins his day as he has for decades. Early, methodical, careful. The Lunat name means something in this small town. Respect earned through years of honest business, the slow accumulation of trust that defines success in places where everyone knows everyone. His home reflects that success. It has high walls topped with razor wire, it has burglar bars on every window, a heavy gate that takes effort to open. Shanis Lunat, 30, is already awake in his childhood bedroom. He never quite moved out, not because he couldn't, but because family business is family business. At 30, he's old enough to have his own dreams, but young enough to believe he still has time to achieve them. He helps his father, learning the rhythms of small town commerce, understanding that success here is measured in reputation and relationships. They don't know that Sibusiso Mpinga, 32, and Nhlanhla Gabela have been watching, planning, waiting for this exact morning when their routines would make them vulnerable. It is 8:47 a.m. The attack begins with violence, not stealth. The gate that Ismail thought would keep intruders out becomes the first barrier to fall. The sound of metal being forced, hinges protesting, the crash of security breached. Inside the house, both men hear it. The sound every South African homeowner dreads. Shanis moves towards the passage, towards the front door, perhaps thinking he can reason with whoever's outside. But this morning the passage becomes a killing ground. Mpinga enters with knives already drawn. No negotiation, no demands, no pause for humanity, just violence, swift and brutal. Shanis encounters death in the space that should have connected his childhood to his future. Multiple stab wounds, blood on tiles his mother once cleaned, walls that held his certificates and birthday pictures. The sounds carry through the house like a nightmare becoming real. Ismail hears his son dying, not just the physical sounds, but something deeper. A father knows. In that moment, 63 years of life collapse into terrible understanding. His child is being murdered in the next room. He grabs the only weapon within reach, a torch kept beside his bed for power outages. It is pathetic against knives, against youth, against the rage of men who kill for money. But what choice does a father have? He moves towards the sounds, carrying a flashlight like a sword. The bedroom where Ismail makes his stand has witnessed decades of private life, nights of sleep, morning conversations about business, quiet hours planning for the future. Family money sits in the cupboard drawer, the savings of a man who worked hard and lived carefully. Now it becomes the scene of his murder. Mpinga and Gabela turn the torch against him, beating the 63-year-old businessman with his own desperate weapon again and again until he collapses beside the bed where he'd slept safely for years, near the cupboard that drew his killers. Father and son dying in the same house minutes apart. The walls that should have protected them becoming witnesses to their deaths. The killers move through the house like scavengers, taking cash that represented years of work, dreams deferred, security saved. They leave behind blood in the passage, chaos in the bedroom, and silence that will haunt this house forever. The discovery comes hours later. Family members arriving at the house find the gate forced open, the silence wrong. Inside, the scene tells its story in blood and chaos. Shanis in the passage, Ismail in the bedroom, a father and son who woke up believing in the protection of their walls, now dead behind the very barriers meant to keep them safe. The call goes out. The SAPS arrives to document what every South African police officer recognizes. Another home invasion turned murder. Another fortress breached. Another family destroyed behind their security gates. But this time, the killers made mistakes. Detective work in small towns operates on different physics than city policing. In Dalton, everyone knows everyone. Whispers travel faster than official reports. A sudden windfall draws attention. Unusual spending patterns become a neighborhood gossip. Sibusiso Mpinga and Nhlanhla Gabela believed they'd gotten away clean. They'd breached the fortress. They'd taken the cash. They left no witnesses alive. But they underestimated how noise travels in sugar country. The investigation team was led by detectives from the Pietermaritzburg Serious Crimes Unit. They began with the evidence left behind, forced entry points, blood spatter patterns, the torch used as a murder weapon. Forensics painted a picture of two attackers, violent and determined, but physical evidence needed names. Those names came from the community. Someone had seen unfamiliar faces near the Lunat house that morning. Someone else noticed Mpinga spending money he shouldn't have. Small town surveillance isn't cameras and technology. It's neighbors who notice, relatives who talk, acquaintances who remember. Within weeks, investigators had their suspects. The arrest came swift and coordinated. Mpinga and Gabela were taken into custody, charged with 2 counts of murder, housebreaking, and robbery with aggravating circumstances. But arrests aren't convictions. The real battle would be fought in the Pietermaritzburg High Court, where both men initially stood defiant, pleading not guilty. Perhaps they believed their silence would protect them. Perhaps they thought criminal loyalty would hold. Perhaps they simply underestimated how evidence and pressure could fracture even the strongest alliances. The case sat in the court system for over a year. Standard delays in an overburdened justice system, postponements, legal maneuvering, witnesses being scheduled and rescheduled. The Lunat family's survivors waited, as families do, for justice that moves slowly while grief moves fast. Then the alliance cracked. Nhlanhla Gabela saw the walls closing in. The evidence was mounting. Forensics tied both men to the scene. Witnesses placed them in the area. The stolen cash had been traced. And perhaps in the long nights of prison awaiting trial, Gabela understood that loyalty to Mpinga meant life imprisonment, while testimony against him meant possibility. He made the calculation criminals always make when brotherhood collides with survival. He chose survival. Gabela approached prosecutors with an offer. He would testify, he would detail everything, planning, the execution, the violence. He would reconstruct that July morning minute by minute, identifying who did what, who killed whom. He would give them Sibusiso Mpinga on a silver platter, wrapped in testimony that no defense could unravel. In exchange, he walked free. When Gabela took the stand, he buried his accomplice, how they'd watched the Lunat house, learning their routines and vulnerabilities, how they planned the robbery, knowing the family kept cash at home, how Mpinga had wielded the knives that killed Shanis in the passage, how they'd both beaten Ismail with his own torch, how they'd ransacked the bedroom for money before fleeing. Detail after devastating detail, a former criminal brother turning state's witness, trading his testimony for freedom. Faced with this betrayal, Sibusiso Mpinga's defense collapsed in November of 2024, 16 months after the murders that took only 20 minutes. He changed his plea to guilty. Perhaps his lawyers advised him that fighting was futile. Perhaps he saw the mathematics of justice and understood the equation. Judge Mlaba showed no mercy for a man who turned a family home into a double murder scene. The sentences fell like hammer blows. Life imprisonment for murdering Shanis Lunat. Life imprisonment for murdering Ismail Lunat. 5 years for housebreaking with intent to commit robbery. And another 15 years for robbery with aggravating circumstances. They will all run concurrent with the life terms. In the cold calculus of criminal justice, cooperation equals freedom. Silence equals life imprisonment. The conviction offers closure, perhaps, but closure isn't resurrection. And the architectural betrayal that enabled their deaths remains unchanged. The Lunat House was designed according to South Africa's security gospel. Walls, bars, gates. Every architectural choice spoke of protection, of lessons learned from a country where home invasion is epidemic. But on that July morning, those defenses became instruments of the victim's destruction. The house's entire security system was based on binary thinking. Keep danger outside, keep family inside. But what happens when danger gets inside? The same barriers that keep threats out now keep the victims in. Walls become cage walls. Bars become prison bars. Gates become locked exits. Every barred window represented the same trade-off: security versus escape. The Lunat family chose security, like thousands of South African families, believing stronger barriers equal safer lives. But barriers work both ways. The razor wire that keeps criminals out also keeps the residents from fleeing. The burglar bars that prevent break-ins also prevent breakouts. This isn't accidental. It's the result of trying to solve community safety problems with individual architectural solutions. The Lunat house represents thousands of similar homes, beautiful cages built by people who confused security with safety, who believed that higher walls could substitute for social trust. But walls can't create safety, only its illusion. And when that illusion fails, the walls that promised protection become architecture of entrapment. The city built the Lunat family's prison long before Mpinga and Gabela turned it into their tomb. When we talk about South Africa's crime statistics, when we reference home invasion numbers, we're talking about people like Ismail and Shanis Lunat. They were father and son, bound by love and business, sharing a life that felt secure until suddenly it wasn't. Their murders weren't random. They were targeted destruction of men who'd built something worth stealing. But their deaths exposed the deadly lie at South African architecture's heart, that individual security can substitute for community safety. The Lunat family did everything right. They built high walls. They installed the bars. They secured the gates. They created a fortress that should have kept them safe. Their story represents thousands of similar tragedies, families who confused security with safety, who believed architectural solutions could solve social problems, who built beautiful cages and called them home. When we say never again, we can't just mean higher walls. We have to redesign safety's fundamental architecture, from domestic spaces that don't trap occupants to communities that don't force families to choose between connection and security. They deserve to be remembered not as crime statistics, but as father and son who tried to build good lives in difficult circumstances, who chose trust over fear until fear found them anyway. The Lunat family home still stands in Dalton, behind its walls and bars and gates. New residents may live there now, believing that those barriers will keep them safe. The business that Ismail built may continue under other names, other hands. The cane fields still stretch over the hills and factory smoke still marks the horizon, but the architecture remains the same. The walls still trap, the bars still cage, the gates still promise security they can't deliver. And across South Africa, families continue building fortresses and calling them homes, trading connection for protection, community for security. Ismail and Shanis Lunat deserved better than to die in their own fortress. Somewhere in the sugar country, their story echoes in every barred window, every razor wire crown, every gate that promises safety but delivers imprisonment. Until we learn to build communities instead of fortresses, we remember them. We say their names. We honor their lives. If this story made you think and re-examine your home, please follow Brick and Blood on your favorite podcast app. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and share this episode. Thank you for listening. Walk softly, listen deeply, and remember, every wall has a story.